Welcome to the Basically Everything podcast,
a podcast where teens and Gen Z share their opinions and ideas on the issues that our world is facing. We view these problems through different perspectives and hopefully inspire teens around the world to evolve with new insights. Without further ado, let's get into our episode.
Whoop whoop, let's go! Hello everyone, I'm Sean.
And I'm Risa.
We're your hosts for this episode of Basically Everything.
In today's episode, we'll be discussing neuroscience and diving deeper into what it truly is and how we can educate ourselves. We'll be going over the general topic of neuroscience itself, and we'll discuss the journeys that people take to learn and develop their skills in this field and the challenges that go along with this mighty experience. With that being said, I'm happy to introduce our guest speaker who will join us for an interview on our topic today, Chinmayi Balusu.
Hi everyone, I'm a second-year undergrad student pursuing neuroscience and medical humanities at Columbia University. I am the founder and CEO of Simply Neuroscience, which is an international student-led nonprofit organization that's dedicated to expanding interdisciplinary neuroscience, and we do so through a framework of education, outreach, and awareness. Outside of Simply Neuroscience, I'm also a student researcher with a background in biomedicine and neurodegenerative diseases, and I also identify as a women in STEM advocate, a aspiring science communicator, and a public speaker. So outside of neuroscience in my free time, I enjoy practicing Taekwondo, playing soccer. I am from Northern California, so I really enjoy being outside and exploring nature trails and gardening. And on weekends, I usually enjoy watching old Telugu movies with my family. And super excited to be here today. Thanks for having me.
All right, to get started, we all want to know, what is neuroscience?
Yeah, so neuroscience can be pretty broadly defined, but it basically comes down to the study of the brain and the nervous system at broad. So it's really interesting to think about. Some people think neuroscience is only the study of the brain, but it also involves many peripheral nerves throughout the body. It includes the spinal cord too. So pretty broad ranging. And the definition is pretty interpretive too. So you can think of neuroscience as encompassing, neurosurgery, economics, so many other fields as well.
That's really cool. Please tell us, why neuroscience? Why do you believe that this is such an important topic, and what provokes your interest in this field?
I strongly believe that understanding neuroscience is a part of it is understanding ourselves, because in school we learn about all these really diverse sciences, from environmental science all the way through physics and chemistry and bio and all of these different courses, but we're not as often exposed to neuroscience at a young age, which is really disappointing, because from the time that we wake up to the time that we go to sleep, we are affected by neuroscience concepts in some way or the other, whether it's getting enough sleep or deciding what is brain healthy food to eat, or deciding to procrastinate versus do your homework now, or even social interactions with friends. So I strongly believe that this is an important field, not just because, it's very rapidly innovating and expanding, but also because it has the potential to really tell us more about how we function as humans and how we can improve our lives or solve many issues that we face, such as disorders, for instance, dementia, for instance, that maybe we can help solve and help improve people's lives. So my interest personally came from that kind of an idea of, I really wanted to understand how my brain functioned, because I was really curious. I used to ask a lot of questions. And so as I grew older, I sort of took the route of neurobiology, explored a little bit of anatomy more, and then later on became involved in research, like I mentioned before, and kind of seeing the collaborative aspects of neuroscience and how broad it was, with so many different connections to fields, and kind of the awareness that I could use with being a neuroscience student, and whether it be raising awareness about mental illnesses or brain injury, it was really impactful. So that was what really kept my interest in the field going and growing too.
Yeah, I also can kind of relate with that, because I'm an aspiring cardiologist, because I also want to pursue the medical field. And then I've always wondered how our hearts work and how important like blood is to our human body. So like I really like idol you when you said that, because after hearing about how you just dreamed of talking about like how our brain works, and then now becoming such a like important person in our like world, doing so much advocate. Did you think that you were different or unique for choosing neuroscience over other biological sciences, in a good way or a bad way?
I would say I don't know if I felt unique as in it was special. I think, well, personally, neuroscience is really special to me, but I don't think that there's sort of any one field in the biological sciences that is better or, worse than any of the others or any less important or more important. I felt that I think neuroscience is especially highlighted among the biological sciences these days because a lot of the innovation is rapidly growing in this niche. And so with that, and especially because we now have a much better understanding of our brain than we did perhaps a century ago, it's definitely sort of on the rise and sort of gaining and expanding popularity as well. So I personally felt when actually it's kind of ironic when I was going through high school people would oftentimes be like, why the heck would you want to study neuroscience? Like, what? I don't really think that. Are you going to be a neurosurgeon one day? Are you going to be, do you think you're special? And I think my answer was more of, I was coming from the neurobiology perspective. I thought it was really interesting. And I thought it was interesting just the way that I found environmental science to be interesting or computer science to be interesting. So I think a lot of it is personal preferences, and some people shift into the field later on in their careers, and some people end up shifting away from it, and that's totally fine. I think it's just a very remarkable field, but just as any of the biological sciences really are. And at the core of science, I mean, STEM at broad is just really trying to find ways that we can better society. I mean, always working towards improvement. So perhaps, neuro is sort of pioneering in some ways, but I think many other fields out there are definitely as well.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
It
Yeah.
was. It sounds really amazing about like how you persevered through all of that, and like just from like a personal aspect, I've heard that like pursuing like these medical degrees are like really really hard. So it's like I'm kind of amazed at how you just like had the guts to like go through it and like through thick and thin, you know?
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree. Like, neuroscience is a really fascinating job to pick. But how did you go about achieving your goals learning neuroscience? Can you give us a brief overview of what you did and have to do to be a student in neuroscience or an advanced field?
Absolutely. So maybe I can go in chronological order more to make sense of kind of where I'm coming from. So when I was in early high school, all throughout high school too, I used to participate in these neuroscience competitions. Actually, they were called Brain Bees. And think of it like Science Bowl, Science Olympiad kind of style competitions, but for neuroscience. So I used to participate in these throughout the years. But what made me a little bit sad was that these were only 1 day events. So I would only meet up with my neuro friends for 1 day a year. And we'd, occasionally stay in touch afterwards, but it wasn't that I was sort of surrounded by this community on a daily basis and that I could grow with. It was very one-time interactions for the most part. And so that will come back to this point a little bit later, but those experiences are really what sparked me to consider getting more hands-on experiences related to exploring the brain and studying it. So that's actually what drove me to participating in research during the summers. My first project was looking at correlations between risk factors of depression. So a little bit of psychology and gathering medical data and analyzing it through CS, a little bit of Python, and is a really wonderful experience. And the next summer, I shifted more into the wet lab setting where I was actually working on age-related diseases and investigating proteins that were implicated in these diseases to see if there's this drug called rapamycin. Won't get too technical, but this drug, looking at its effects on brain tissue in mice was what I was up to. Now, outside of the specifics of these projects, what I really liked was that being in high school, I was able to take what I was learning from AP Bio or other science courses and put them to use, or at least visualize them through the lab. And I think that's what's very cool about neuroscience, is that there is so much impact beyond the textbook and beyond the classroom to be able to go and put it into application in a lab space, or whether you're coding or anything and beyond. So research is definitely something that was a big part of kind of seeing the academic side of neuroscience, and has been a large influential factor in me considering to go potentially into a mix of academia when I pursue, a future career. Now, going back to the idea of collaboration and those friends from Brainbees that I spoke about, that was actually a very defining part of why I founded Simply Neuroscience, in that I wanted to build that kind of a collaborative community where we didn't just focus on one aspect of neuroscience, but really it was welcome to all. And so, regardless of if you considered yourself a aspiring entrepreneur, an aspiring artist, an aspiring surgeon, any person, a musician, ethicist, anyone could come together around discussions about the brain and its implications on our lives. So that's the kind of vision that Simply Neuroscience has, and I would say it's been a very, very large part of my own journey in understanding exactly what my world looks like as a neuro student, and even into the future as a neuro professional, even though it's so far off to think about. And I think especially with the timeline sort of lines up that I founded Simply Neuroscience and was building the initial stages as I was matriculating at Columbia. And so Columbia being a school that really emphasizes not just research, but also those kind of multidisciplinary perspectives, it really went hand in hand with sort of my own exploration and development with Simply Neuroscience. So definitely, I think it was these years. I mean, I'm still in college, I guess, but this past year, and it feels like forever with the pandemic, and into the next couple of years as well. Definitely a unique time period in terms of exploring my own interests and exploring what neuroscience can offer. And as of right now, I'm hoping that to pursue kind of a career at the intersection of academia, the clinical setting, and outreach to science communication. But that's kind of a lot of different ways to go about doing so. But overall, to kind of outline what exactly, becoming a neuroscience student, I don't know if there was sort of one day where I was a neuroscience student and the day before I was not, or any kind. It was definitely an evolution of its own. So it involved a lot of learning on my own, self-studying a lot of times, because there weren't many neuro professionals in my life, especially a few years ago. I grew up in a suburban town where it was very tech heavy and not too much neuro going on. So it was a little bit difficult, especially on the younger side too, but a lot of self-studying. These brain beat competitions were a wonderful resource, and I also used to, if you guys are familiar with Coursera, online free courses, I used to learn from that website platform as well. And research was, again, a very influential factor. And the kind of the current step in my journey is sort of pursuing neuroscience in college. But I say this all as kind of my own personal reflection, and I acknowledge that everyone's neuroscience journey is pretty unique. They're pretty different. Some people stumble across it early on. Some people don't, get to explore it until later on in their career, or when they're in their 40s, 50s, and even after post-retirement sometimes. So it's never too late or too early to start studying neuroscience, in my opinion, and I'll pause there.
Go.
So at the end of the day, neuroscience is something that's very flexible from person to person, and every individual's journey is different, which is one of the beautiful parts of being involved in the field.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like hearing about your from when you started, how you started liking neuroscience till where you are right now, it's been quite a journey. So after you were talking about all this, did you face any challenges on this? Because there's no way that you would just walk an easy path up to college and be where you are right now. And what kind of obstacles did you face?
Yeah, quite a few. I will acknowledge, though, that I was thankful to have a very supportive family. My parents definitely were huge advocates for me, whether it be driving me multiple hours to go participate in events or things like that. So Definitely were a lot of wonderful folks along the way who supported me, parents, and mentors and everyone. I will say that one of the kind of challenges that I see, and I think I see especially now too, is that I think especially for a lot of Gen Z and I mean young students our age, is that kind of the perception of you're too young to get involved in leadership, entrepreneurship, all of these. Why are you sort of getting involved in this? It's a waste of time, all of that. What are you actually going to do? And it was pretty intimidating when I was starting out Simply Neuroscience because I founded it when I was 16 years old, and I'm now 18. And I guess times have changed a little bit because we were seeing a lot more youth involvement, especially during the pandemic when youth are taking initiative. But I think especially because neuroscience is so technical, as the older and kind of more advanced you go, there was kind of the perception that I don't have a degree behind my back other than my high school diploma. I obviously do not have the same level of expertise anywhere close to as one a professional who has a PhD or an MD, for instance, or any other degree. So it was kind of the internal struggle of I'm trying to be an advocate for my own neuroscience education and as well for other students, but am I really qualified? And I think what I've slowly come to understand is that I see this gap in my community, and I see a gap in a lot of people's communities as well. And someone needs to help bridge that. So, who better than students to help bridge the gap for students? Because we know what each of us is going through, and we know that we can create solutions to problems that more effectively address our concerns and our needs. For instance, Gen Z, I mean, as we go on and on, when we grow and develop, we're not the kind of textbook students and straight to college diploma kind of kids anymore. We're putting things into action in our communities. And so, whether it be bite sized information facts on social media or kind of those hosting those kind of conversations about change makers, it's really important to address the needs of our students. Um, I would say another obstacle I've definitely come across is um, being an Indian woman in STEM. There's kind of the perception that Indians and Asians abroad too are really good at the sciences. Kind of everything comes naturally, and something that was really difficult was I didn't see many Indian females in neuroscience. So actually, my current one of my current mentors in college is a Indian woman, and she's honestly very inspiring to me because before that I had not seen someone like myself in my from my community who looked like me and was involved in the path that I wanted to pursue as well. So I think kind of understanding that, I think a lot of our times our identities have these sort of internal pressures on ourselves too. Because I kind of oftentimes, I would walk into a room and it would be mostly, Caucasian individuals, for instance, in a psychology seminar or something like that. I didn't feel that I fit there. But we're kind of trying to build that kind of a community through Simply Neuroscience, which has definitely been eye-opening. It's really great to see what kind of perspectives everyone can bring. Um, yeah, and overall, I would say at the end of the day, time management is also super difficult, and it's a lot to juggle being a full-time student and being a kind of a full-time founder at times too. There are certainly weeks where I am taking a full, course workload, and I've definitely put in 40 hours a week sometimes on SN, and it's quite a lot. But I think what really keeps me going is trying to be very, very stringent on terms of time management. Um, Teamwork is definitely big. One person cannot do everything. And so when everyone splits up the work and not just brings in valuable perspectives, but also makes for more enriched and effective work. So a lot of not just personal lessons, but also grappling with kind of representation in neuroscience along the way, grappling with being often the youngest person in the room and continues to be that case in terms of making these kinds of um, neuroscience impactful moves, I would say.
Yeah, I can completely agree with you because our country faces a lot of racial injustice. And then now that you bring up stuff about like women empowerment and different things like this, I can see why your journey to where you are right now was really, really difficult. And I'm kind of still like idolizing you for that, because there's not that many people around me who have like been through such a tough journey, you know? And
Yeah, there's definitely been obstacles, but I'm also, very privileged in many ways too. So I think a lot of times entrepreneurship journey is so individual. There's a lot of individual challenges, but I definitely have, I know many, other neuroscience peers of color who face a lot more difficulties getting involved in the field too. So I'm thankful and privileged in that way. But yeah, like you said, I think we all have a very long way to go though in STEM. So we all just have to try to build one step at a way, one step at a time to get there.
Yeah, I totally agree. You talked about being the only Indian woman in a room full of Caucasians, and I totally resonate with that. And I think it's really comforting to know that people like you and everyone are recognizing that problem in our society. And since we're on the topic of challenges in high school and college, for students who are wanting to pursue neuroscience as a major or even a minor, what should students who are either in high school or college do to prepare for it? How can they get involved to get a good head start?
Mhm. I will, before I start, I will say that, like I mentioned before, it's never too early or too late to get involved in neuroscience. So if there are, for instance, some uncontrollable life circumstances, especially during the pandemic or anything like that, where you feel that time is passing by and you don't have the means to get involved in neuroscience, it's never too late. It's never too late in college, in grad school, med school, even beyond. So I will just put that out there to start with. I will say for high school and college folks, especially, I think that there are a multitude of ways to get involved. And I personally have experience with research, with brain beat competitions and that sort, science fairs and that sort. But I will say that that is not the only way to get involved in neuroscience. I know quite a few folks who are involved in visual art. And so as they sort of started learning independently about neuroscience, they started to visualize their interests in forms that tied in neuro to their interests in art. And especially for a lot of young aspiring entrepreneurs, for instance, or if someone is really interested in neurotech, neurotechnology, in that line, startup culture, anything like that. I think a lot of times we see huge initiatives like Neuralink, for instance, and a lot of brain computer interfaces, and even something as small as keeping up with the news in terms of a subtopic in neuro that you're interested in can go a very long way. Um, I would say that it's it's definitely getting involved in neuro is something that is slowly to hopefully rapidly expanding, but there still is a large gap when it comes to the early neuro education. There is sort of a very large gap in the pipeline for us students our age. So I will say that it will take quite a bit of time and really trying to do your research in terms of finding information, finding mentors, but I will say that if I will personally say that if there's anything that I can help out with for any students out there or peers our age, or if there are any sort of resources that are online, I'd be happy to connect you guys with. I will say a simple Google search can go a very long way, and there's no such thing as a stupid question. So you can enter all of those questions about neuro that you're curious about. How do I find a neuroscience summer internship? How do I major in neuroscience? Kind of what courses do I need to take in high school? All of those different questions are something to go for and ask those questions. Really do. Don't be intimidated by, experts or sort of people who look like they have their stuff together. I will say, sort of to quickly outline, courses are really useful. So psychology, if it's at your school, or bio, many of these different courses can be helpful. You can self-learn a lot of times. If you're not, interested in more of the meaty part of neuro, but you want to learn more in terms of the experiences of people who work in neuro, there's always books like, gosh, I'm trying to think of a few. Um, Do No Harm by Dr. Henry Marsh is a wonderful one. I believe there's one called Another Day in the Frontal Lobe by Dr. Katrina Fairlick. So there's a lot of books out there by neurosurgeons and other professionals in the field that are really cool to get insight into. Um, I know there's also the increasing trend of sort of virtual shadowing opportunities. So even searching up, what does a neuroeconomics do on a daily basis in their career, or sort of what do people in neuro art focus on, things like this. Just looking it up on YouTube or following the accounts of these professionals on Instagram or Twitter can be a really great start. So that was sort of a huge jumble of different paths to go in. But I will say that it is because the path is jumbled too. So there's no straightforward path, and it's okay to feel lost at many times. And I think that we can, it's not ideal to be lost, but hopefully we can diminish that sense of feeling lost and confused by creating a more cohesive community for youth neuroscience folks.
Definitely. Since we're discussing stuff about opportunities and challenges that people will face in high school and college, we'd like to know more about your organization, Simply Neuroscience. Could you tell us a bit about it for the people who are interested?
Absolutely. So we are a student-led team who creates events, opportunities, resources, everything for free and all virtually for fellow students. So it's very much a youth community made up of young students. And at the end of the day, we're working to create a world in which any student, regardless of where they live, what languages they speak, what gender they identify as, what race they are, what socioeconomic status, or what age they are, can pursue neuroscience through these various opportunities. So, kind of an idea of what we actually do to kind of fulfill that vision is we have a variety of initiatives ranging from a podcast. We're on a podcast right now, but a podcast to Humans of Neuroscience series to creating free resources to advising students through a virtual mentorship program. So a wide variety of things going on. And all of these sort of fall into the three-tiered mission that I mentioned before of education, outreach, and awareness. So kind of equipping students at every journey, every step of their journey in neuroscience to be able to be, empowered students and professionals when they go out in the future. So very much addressing how multifaceted the field is through exploring those multidisciplinary connections, and also acknowledging that no one's journey is the same. So we really want to engage with our audience and young students in what manner that they feel would be most useful for them.
Oh yeah, thank you for your overview of your organization, Simply Neuroscience. And we've learned so much today, and we're very thankful that you were willing to meet us and get our possibly many other doubts cleared. Neuroscience is a topic that many people don't understand because of its vastness, and we've learned so much today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to share about neuro. It's really a fascinating field, I believe, and I would love to see more and more students get involved and support them along the journey, however best I can and however best my teammates at Simply Neuroscience can. Yeah, thank you for having me today. It was really wonderful to share.
Yep. And please stay tuned for our next episode about time management with our guest speaker that we will still have to invite, that will be releasing around sometime next year. Thank you for tuning in.